Hey, everybody, and welcome again to our second of the, I think it's like 7 or 8 part series involving oil paints. And today I've got a still life setup that we're going to try and do in one sitting. Try being the operative word there. It's kind of a busy still life. There's a lot of moving parts, but I think we can do it. So I do want to get right into it. So let's just go over everything right off the bat here. Here's the supply list. And as usual, it's very flexible. So don't panic if everything's not explicitly the same as what is on the list here. But white, yellow ochre, raw umber, ultramarine blue, cadmium red, cadmium yellow, some paper towels, Liquin, which is a type of oil painting medium, linseed oil, that's another type of medium that you can use. You don't need the medium, but I will use it here, and I find it helpful to kind of control the stickiness or the fluidity of the paint. So it's really up to you in terms of personal preferences how that goes. And then a rag or a roll of paper towels. I've got paper towels, but actually a cotton rag is probably best. So that's a quick rundown of the supplies. Like I said, don't panic if it's not perfectly in line with what's on the list. As long as you got paints, and as long as you've got brushes, and as long as you've got a piece of canvas. This is a 9x12 piece of canvas. And it is cotton, just sort of regular standard issue cotton. I have stained it this yellow background color. That is something you don't necessarily have to do. I like to do it, especially something that's got a lot of light and warmth to it, like the scene that we're going to be painting in the upper right there. That's sort of my preference. But if you've just got white, it's fine. With oils, you really need to be careful about the surface that you paint on. Oil, the oil that is the medium of oil paint, it's a vegetable oil, and over time it will ruin a whole variety of surfaces if you don't treat it properly. Wood and canvas are sort of the primary, substrates, drawing surface, painting surface that is used in oil paints. And it all has to be treated with gesso. Acrylic gesso is what I use. And oftentimes paint canvas, like these little pads that I have here, these 9x12 pads, or bigger or smaller for that matter, are usually pre-primed with acrylic gesso. And if that's the case, then you can paint right on them. They're ready to go. But if it's raw canvas, if it's just sort of ordinary fabric, like, let me show you that. Like this. This is ordinary canvas without gesso on it. You would have to put a layer or 2 or 3 of gesso, depending upon how thick and runny your gesso is. And you can see this is the untreated side. And then on the other side, I have it was actually pre-primed, so it had the gesso on it, and then I put the yellow on it. So I've got a whole bunch of this ready to go. So it's to prepare it really easy. I'm not going to go over that today because I do want to get started. But it is a necessity with oil paintings, no matter what surface you're painting on. Wood, the same thing. Over time, the oil, like I said, will break down fabric, will break down paper, will break down wood. So that's a really important thing to get sorted. Okay, so we're going to be doing this little still life over here. This is something I set up earlier today. Did a lot of sort of composing, getting the light right. It's natural light that I took the photograph in, and I kind of moved the picture frame around, just sort of, did the little window, kind of moved it around until I got the just the composition that I wanted. And the way I do that with a camera anyway is I just take a picture of the general setup, and then I end up cropping it with my little cropping device that you've got on your phone. This is just sort of a standard phone photograph, so nothing terribly complicated. This is a much closer, bigger version of it. So it is, it's got lots of nice kind of diagonal shadows here. This one right here, that one right here. Everything is more or less sort of in this middle third of the, in terms of the objects, like the lemons and the wine glass, although that's apple juice, full disclosure. And the little apple, it's all sort of in this middle band of the composition. So taking some time to set something up is something I really can't emphasize enough. It's really important. If you do a great painting of a boring composition, it's going to be like, wow, you've got the most amazingly painted shoebox in the world. It's still a shoebox. It's kind of boring. Try to make it a little bit more dynamic, get lots of contrast, darks and lights, if that's something you're into. A fair amount of color variety. Like I said, those sort of diagonal lines make things interesting. This is kind of a nice little off-kilter shadow in the background there, right behind the wine glass. I like a lot of the kind of slightly off geometric lines, and that makes it interesting. Okay, so as usual, as I'm working, feel free to ask questions, and Raina will get those to me and do that through the chat. Just ask a question in the chat if you've got anything that is relevant to what we're talking about, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible.
We've got a few already, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So first, someone wants to know, what is the proper way to dispose of paper towels and whatnot when they're soaked in like linseed and whatnot?
Well, if they're only soaked, the only toxic thing you have to worry about is if it's got certain, like cadmium is a heavy metal, which is, in California, if you have cadmium, you have to say this is a cancer causing agent. So there's some pigments that have a toxicity to them naturally. So if you're using cadmiums, and actually, I know I had it on my list, I'm not actually using any of the cadmiums on here. So all of the paints that I'm using are non-toxic. And as long as you're not using mineral spirits, like a solvent of some sort, turpentine, things like that, which I will not be today, you can throw them right in the trash because it's just vegetable oil. Because linseed oil, this is linseed oil here. This is what I'm going to be using as partially as my medium. This is just vegetable. It's like salad oil. It would be like, taking a napkin that you use to wipe up some spilt salad oil on your tabletop or whatever. Totally disposable, totally non-toxic. So you should, as long as you're not using those nasty heavy metals, be able to throw it away. But if you've got solvents, in my studio and the studios that I've worked in the past, they often will have sort of a hazardous little red jar with a lid on it. And it's more for fire than anything else, because sometimes this stuff, it's a fire hazard as well. So you got to watch out for that. But if you're just, doing a painting, end of the day, and there's nothing toxic in it, you can just throw it in the trash as normal.
Gotcha. Allie wants to know, how long will your paints stay wet that way?
How long will they stay wet when I'm using them on the surface here?
Yeah, well, no, like when you have them on your palette under the plastic, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah. So this right here, that's a good segue into what I was going to do next. This is the paint that I used yesterday. This is a little messy from what I did on Monday, but I'm just going to lift this saran wrap off, and most of this paint, in spite of not the thin ones, these ones here, those have kind of dried out a little bit, although they're still tacky. But this is wet. All of the big puddles of paint are still wet, and oils will stay open and active for at least a day. Even if I hadn't covered this up, these would still probably be usable. I always cover them up, just, because the way they dry is they get in contact with air. So if you keep air away from them, they'll stay open for days. Yeah, good questions. All right.
Gotcha. And how many layers of gesso before you just give up on a canvas?
Well, to prepare it, You probably could get away with one if it's thick gesso. If it's kind of thinner and real liquidy, you might need to do 2 or 3 coats. It's all about separating, creating a barrier between the gesso and the fabric or the wood or whatever you're using. So you kind of have to play it by ear. There's different grades of gesso. You know, there'll be sometimes professional grade or student grade. Like student grade, I would probably do at least 3 layers of gesso. That's why I buy the sort of artist grade. It's more expensive, a lot more expensive, but I'm using essentially 1/3 of it every time I prepare a canvas.
Gotcha. And Leslie, who has attended every one of your classes, by the way,
Ooh, yes.
she loves watercolors and has very
Yep.
little interest in oil painting.
Uh-huh.
So what would you say to her that would make her possibly interested in oil painting? As
Oh,
in, like,
I have to sell oil painting in
what's
like one.
what's the better thing? You know what I mean? Like for
Well,
usage.
they're completely different. Oil painting is heavier, thicker, and oils, especially if we're talking about oils and acrylics sort of being different than watercolor. The paint is generally much more opaque, so you can kind of cover things up. One of the frustrations I have with watercolor is if I've got something that's not working and it's really sort of fluid and translucent, it's really hard to kind of cover it up. You can kind of go back and take it away and stuff like that, but then you start messing, you start messing with the paper and it gets all abraded and things like that. With oils, you can just throw paint over top of something that's not working and essentially start over, or lift it up with a rag. So it's really versatile in that way, in that there's no, I feel like with watercolor, you gotta really sort of commit to something in order to move on. And with oils, you can just sort of try stuff out a little bit more. It's a little bit more free in that way. Watercolors, you're a little bit more beholden to each mark being kind of almost, you got to live with it kind of situation.
Cool.
All right, great.
That's it. Sorry.
Great. Oh yeah, no, that's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start really loose here. I'm going to start with a kind of a mid-sized round bristle brush. These are sort of the scruffier, rougher brushes. And I have got my medium here that I've mixed up. It's sort of half of the linseed oil and half of the Liquin, which gives me a longer drying time than straight Liquin, but a shorter drying time than straight oil. Oil being very slow to dry, and the Liquin speeds things up. So I'm just going to use this kind of as I would like water in watercolor. And I'm just going to take a little bit of this, and I'm going to put out some umber here, and I'm just going to draw. I've already cheated a little bit, so I've got a head start on you. But all I'm going to do now is just kind of block things in kind of a general way. This is going to be a real test, because I kind of set up a difficult still life. I was thinking I'll just do a few things, but of course I always bite off more than I can chew, generally speaking. So I'm just going to block things in kind of a general way. And if you've been with me for a few classes, you know this is just my MO. I kind of like to get a lay of the land in the values, in the overall lights and darks. So I'm just gonna drop in, generally speaking, sort of the darks at this stage, not worrying about color too much. There's a nice dark right behind this glass. So just blocking things in a very general way. Yeah, I was thinking, oh, I'll just do like a lime and a lemon and put it on a chopping block. But then I was like, oh, look at that reflective quality in the liquid in the glass. And so, yeah, my own fault. I am now sleeping in the bed that I made, as they would say. All right. So once again, nice and loose, not trying to be too heavy with my pigment, just kind of laying in kind of a lighter version. If I were using mineral spirits, which I do, but I'm not for these projects because I'm kind of working in my house, and I don't want to get this stinky stuff in there. This would be where I would probably use, instead of medium, I would use the mineral spirits. As a matter of fact, I would use them. So if you're in a studio or something that's sort of separate from where you eat and live and all that sort of thing, and you want to try mineral spirits, this would be a good stage, because oil painting, one of the mantras of oil painting is fat over lean. And when they mean by fat is sometimes they mean thick, like thick paint over thin. And that's what we're doing here. We're doing sort of this thin coat first. But what it really means is it means it gets more oily as you go. Fat being oil, which is true. It is a type of fat. And as you progress, you're going to be adding more of the oily, heavy stuff as you progress through the painting. So that's kind of the history behind that. I'm gonna switch my thing here. I've got a bigger version on my laptop of the, there we go. I can see things a little bit better. Yeah, so in these early stages, I don't like to try and do too much. There are painters that work like with colors straight off the bat, and I'm just not one of those painters. I mean, most people that I know that are painters do sort of a limited palette version, and they all work simple in the very early stages. There are very few painters that would, start with the glass and just try and do all the detail stuff first. It just doesn't make any sense. And it never works because you always kind of get tunnel vision. So just try and look at the big picture. It's almost like looking through a camera where the clarity of the picture is really reduced, and you're not seeing it clear. It's almost blurry. And then as you get more sure of the decisions that you've made, you can start to get a little bit more defined. And hopefully as I progress through this, you'll start to see that. I'm kind of leaving some of these highlights open just to kind of leave some space for some nice, stronger highlights. Yeah. You notice I've got it taped down. That is not a necessity. It's just something I like to do for these demos. I mean, honestly, I would in a studio situation, I'd be working on this on an easel, probably upright, but that wouldn't work so well. I may try that later when I get a little more comfortable with everything and I get a studio set up that works for this format. So just sort of adding some of these little rolls of that fabric in, but making it kind of subdued in the shadows a little bit. Let's see, some more of this. I'm kind of getting into some little tight areas, so I might start using a smaller brush. As a matter of fact, I'm going to switch right now, get even smaller, maybe I'll get one of these kind of flat brushes, but small is really what I'm looking for. Give me a nice crisp edge where the shadow, yeah, like that. That looks good. All right, let's see here. Not worrying about sort of all the detail like in this base here. Just trying to get the big shapes first. I'll get to that shortly, but for the time being, this is really all that I want to do, is just those big shapes to small shapes. it's kind of like almost the negative of a photograph. You know, it just sort of looks, I mean, it's not a negative in that like everything's reversed, the lights are dark and the darks are light. It's just everything is just black and white. There's not a lot of definition to anything. Got some shadows in here. Let's do that. It's a little bit better. These are little mushrooms. You're wondering what these tiny little things are.
What color are you using?
This is burnt raw umber, excuse me. But
Gotcha.
anything, sort of anything dark and neutral, like burnt umber would be good. It's a little warmer. You could even do a sienna, which is a lighter color.
And Allison said one problem that she's having is that she lays down these dark umbers and blacks, and then when she goes to paint on top of them, they get muddled. So what do you do to prevent that?
Well, you won't, in this one, you won't. You won't prevent it so much as you'll just try and strategically, use more paint where you need to kind of get rid of that brown. I like to use, some people like to use more of a, like a lighter color, like a yellow ochre or something like that, or maybe something a little bit darker than that. And the yellow is easier to integrate in than the brown would be. That's why I'm working really kind of thinly with this. I just want to really define these dark shapes. But yes, I understand that frustration, and hopefully what we'll figure out as we go along is the next layer of paint is going to be more pigment, less diluted element, like the medium. So we're going to start using heavier amounts of paint. The idea being that we just sort of firm things up and commit more to the colors, and then these browns just sort of get absorbed into it rather than being a total muddy interloper into all this. But I understand that frustration, but for me to get the values right is more important to me than getting the colors right in the beginning. I can always come back when it's dry and just do a little touching up, and if I need to kind of firm things up, I would rather do that than just start with a kind of a color barrage that leaves things confusing as far as values go. Value, I mean, if you're working realistically, value is the quality of the painting that gives it a sense of light, a sense of volume, roundness, and oftentimes a sense of depth, dimensionality. So those things are pretty vital in something like this, where we're shooting for a degree of accuracy and realism. If you're kind of going more expressive color, maybe a Matisse or a Pierre Bonnard or somebody like that, then it's all about the color and making the color kind of harmonize, and you're not looking at reality so much. Okay.
And Alice wants to know, how much linseed oil did you add to the umber? Like, was it a few drops? Was it more?
Well, it was actually,
Less?
so what I added was not straight linseed oil. It was a mix of linseed oil and Liquin in about a 50-50 ratio. And I would say in the beginning stages, I'm using a fair amount. And generally speaking, as I go through the painting, it's going to be less medium, more pigment. Like right now, I'm sort of coming through and getting a little bit more dark with some of these lines, and I just want that medium to kind of take a back seat. So I'm using more of the pigment, less medium. Does that make sense? I hope.
Did to me.
All right. Generally, as you move along, the paint is going, and this is a general statement, the paint is going to get thicker as you move along. Okay, so I think I got a pretty good sense of the overall values here. Let me just do actually that. This is kind of a big. This kind of blotting it in, it's really kind of lots of sort of highlights and stuff like that. Let's see here. Do a little bit in there. Okay, now I think it's time to play around with a little bit of color. And where shall I start? I think I'll start, actually, I'm going to start with the different little high keyed up accents, like the yellow and the green and things like that. And I'm just going to do that with a similar size brush because we're working fairly small here. And my decision to do that is completely arbitrary. I'm trying to, you know, keep things moving, making decisions on the fly. This is sort of an easy way to kind of work from object to object. I'll just work in something it's in the middle. It's got a strong color, just to show you what I'm going to do as I go from color to color here, or from object to object. So I am going to integrate this yellow in with that shadow color. As I'm doing that, I've got my rag handy here. So the person who asked about muddying things up, this is where, you know, as soon as I got in there, I kind of cleaned the brush off a little bit with my rag, and I just moved around. I'm just blocking in that general color there. Not trying too much here. And then I'm going to go right into the green because I'm just going to start with that. And I've got this green kind of already mixed up over here. You can all see that, right? There we go. And I'm just going to block these in kind of the same way. I didn't do the separation here between the shadow and the highlights, but I'll do that as I move along. This is I'm working what's called in the alla prima style, meaning in the first. And this is a style of painting that was probably introduced most prominently by the Impressionists, in the French Impressionists, so like the mid 1800s, feel like Claude Monet and Renoir and people like that. And they would try and just get the impression down as quickly as they could. So they were sort of reacting to changes in light, you know, how it affected patterns and things like that. And so they weren't really, you know, doing much of this underpainting, to be honest. That's just something that I feel like I need to do to get kind of a stronger sense of how things are going. So now I'm going to start heightening some of the lights here using thicker paint. No medium involved in this portion. So I'm using straight yellow to get some of these highlights. Straight yellow right here. This is pretty heavy paint. I mean, if you can see that, that's a good amount of paint on there. So I'm really kind of dousing it. So straight, brilliant yellow, lemon yellow, whatever you want. Do I have any green in this lemon at all? Not really. You kind of use it as a mid-tone. And then on, particularly on this lime, it's even lighter. So I'm going to add a little white to that. So I'm lightening things up because the light is coming from this side. And that generally, the lighter you get things, that tends to be where your light source is from. So I'm just kind of blocking all of that in. Nothing complicated here, just kind of following the light. A la prima, doing it all at once. Normally, in you know, like this kind of the style of painting that I did yesterday, it would have been more, you know, you would maybe wait the next day till it's dry and then try and adjust the color. So what I'm going to do now is I've kind of wiped off my brush here of all these light colors, especially, and I'm going to try and mix up kind of a darker green. So I'm going to just have this yellow, use this blue, and I'm going to maybe add a little bit. I kind of like this. I want to see how this looks. Let's just try this. This is pretty much straight blue. Oh, I got some red in that brush. That's sort of the phantom color that I was probably right over here by the palette. Let's try and integrate it in. There we go. That's better. And adding that shadow in there, that shadow there. This kind of blue-green that I'm mixing up is actually working pretty good for what I want from it. We'll just add this one here. I didn't do this initially. And you're all asking the same question that I'm asking myself right now, which is how in the world am I going to finish all of this? And the answer is I have no idea. I'll do my best. All right, so now I'm just going to work around and I'm just going to block colors in as best I can. I'm going to try and find the, let's do the yellow of the wine, the fake wine, the apple juice. I'll just take a little bit of yellow ochre. So this is just color matching stuff here. Yellow ochre, maybe some of this straight yellow. So I don't want it, you know, I don't want it lemon yellow, but it's definitely yellow. It's more of a golden color. I'm just going to lay that in. I think that's pretty good, actually. It's got a tiny bit of red in it.
So Mike, so when you're switching between colors and you want to use the same brush, how do you wash it, or do you not wash it?
Well, I oftentimes will work strategically in the sense that it's like I sort of went from yellow, which is kind of the lightest of the colors, the most easily contaminated. And then I went to something where I add a little bit of something else to it. And now I'm going to something else that's not going to be too, like I'm not going to go to the red right away. Like that's going to be the last thing I use because that's on the other end of my palette. So I'm kind of working my way around in a strategic way, trying to be, you know, sort of logical in terms of the way that the paint is going to react to what's already on there. Having said that, if I'm really worried about it, I'm just pulling as much of this paint off as I can each time I'm you know, moving from object to object. All right, so now I'm going to do the real strong highlights in there, and this is just going to be taking that color. This is called making a tint. So you're just adding white to the base color. This is titanium white, but any white will work. So doing something like that. That's more white than it's yellow, but for the time being, that's going to have to do.
And Leslie wants to know, how do you determine when you wash down a color versus when you use the color like directly?
When you like thin it out, you mean?
Well, yeah, she said it looks like you used the umber with a medium, like the oil, and then you used the yellow full strength when you did the lemon.
Yeah, well, when I generally as I'm working, the overall idea is that you're working thin to thick, fat over lean, thick paint over lean paint. So I'm kind of doing that systematically as I go from object to object. So it's not, I don't do it all at once. Like I don't add, like everything's not equally thin and then equally medium and then equally thick. For this process, I'm kind of doing it from object to object, if that makes sense. Normally, I'd have more time and I'd be able to do it kind of all over a little bit more. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, I'm trying to kind of speed the process up, for lack of a better word, if that makes sense. So right now I'm using really pretty thick paint. Let's see here. Let's see, actually this color that I have on here is a pretty good match to this. I'm going to just see how that looks. Now this is one of the beauties of oil painting. Probably needs to be a little bit browner, like less yellow. So I may just add a tiny bit of red. So you can see, I'm just looking what's on my brush. And to go back to that question that was asked before is, I mean, this is how I paint. I'll be like, all right, this is what I have on my brush right now. Where can I go that's going to, be a next logical place to go with this paint on here, or it's not going to be a huge deal to kind of change the color. And I'm kind of determining that the top of this butcher block is the place to do that. It's got kind of a varied, there's a little bit of orange in it and there's a little bit more white in it. So I've got a lot of that on my brush right now. So you got to be careful here. I'm going to add a little bit of medium because I want a little bit more flow. I want it to move around a little bit. I don't want it to pick up this green, just being really kind of delicate around the objects, especially with a lot of white on there, because I get a little green in there and it's like, oh, all of a sudden my butcher block is green. That's not where I want to be with that. So it's a nice sliver of light here. Let's lay that in. Okay, that looks butcher blocky. So this is just a matter of, looking at the colors, how they're reacting to each other. Like I think this is actually a pretty good match as to what's going on here. And that's, one of the great things and infuriating things about painting in general is how do I get from what I've got over here to the light as it's, projecting onto this. So, I mean, you've got to make a lot of kind of leaps of faith. And, the best advice I can give people for dealing with color is experiment. Like I was working on some flesh tones not too long ago, and I started adding this kind of earthy purple, and it made perfect sense. It worked, and I would have never done that. But I was just like, all right, the colors I'm using are doing okay, but I feel like it needs another depth to it, another step, and it was this sort of earthy purple that I had stumbled upon. All right, so now what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the that kind of background, this area right in here. That's a pretty big, bold color. I'm just kind of, it's got a little bit more red to things, but it's still kind of that woody, earthy color. This is not it. I'm just adding yellow ochre. More red, more red. Eh. What do we think? Maybe do some white? Not a lot. White is like putting cream in your coffee. It goes a long way. So be careful of what you wish for when you use that white. I think people in general in painting across all mediums rely on white too much to solve all their problems. It's not the be all end all. It'll make things lighter, which is oftentimes what you need. But it also dilutes paint. It kills the intensity. I'm not sure about that at all. I'll start with it though. This block. Sometimes you just need to block in a color. It might not be what you need, and I need a bigger brush. That often happens. You'll be cruising along and you'll realize, wow, why the heck was I using that brush? So I'm just going to go for a nice flat brush. And sometimes the color that you're after might be not very interesting. So I'm going to see how this kind of peachy color holds. And whenever you're playing through kind of reflective glass here, you don't want to, like here I'm being more uniform in the application of that paint. But when it's through the glass, just letting a little bit of color pop through. Sometimes it'll be darker, sometimes it'll be a little lighter, a little bit more evenly applied. Keeping some of the texture of these marks in here. This color is way off from what's there. One thing that I'm going to have to do is the shadows are going to have to get much darker. Right. And this little red that I've actually mixed up, it's much more of a cherry than probably an oak, which is what this little thing is back here. I like it in there. But some of that red is actually in the little cloth here. So I'm going to just sort of add some of this design in here. Just for kicks. And I'm not being super faithful to the pattern. I'm just sort of mimicking the general idea of it down here. This kind of stuff, you could spend 6 months painting the fabric here. Since we don't have 6 months, I'm going to speed that process up a little bit. I'm just adding little kind of touches. This is more kind of impressionistic type application. I think it looks all right though, for the time being. See, there's a little bit of it in here. So the silver lining of that kind of weird color that I've mixed up right here is that it actually is working pretty well for this. So I've got that right. Anybody run into horrible missteps or problems they have questions about? Feel free to ask anything that's working, not working. If you're having amazing success, let us know about that too. All right, so I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just let this sit for a little while. This is not right, but it is what it is for the time being. I'm going to take that as a root, and I'm just going to use this dark color that I had mixed up. And this was a little bit of red, this color here, a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, and a fair amount of umber. So that's my nice sort of standard issue dark. I'm just going to come back and kind of invigorate some of these darks with this big brush. Let's kind of come back to that original part. And since the root of all this color here is umber, this umber that I've got on here is just getting nicely integrated in there. So there was a method to that idea. I could have done the shadows in like kind of a really dark blue if I wanted to, and then done something like this to kind of get everything in. This background color looks a little bit better now that I put this darker on there, this darker color on there, because it has a fair amount of red. It's actually the same one that I mixed up yesterday. And if you were here yesterday, you know that I put a fair amount of red in that because it was part of this landscape. And it had a lot of light in it and a lot of warmth. So I added some red to the overall dark that I was mixing up. Let's see where else. There. Just find these darker areas, kind of the root of the shadows. Shadows are generally speaking not all one monolithic color. They're more varied than they might appear. Add some of that in here, going with the impressionistic idea. There's that fold that comes all the way across, comes down in here. That looks pretty good. Let's see what else. This edge here is pretty dark. It's kind of finding that edge of the butcher block there. This sort of reddish dark that I've mixed up is getting a lot of pretty good mileage out of that. And when you're working wet into wet alla prima like this, you just have to accept that there's going to be a little bit of cross-pollination in your colors. And the best way to do that is to, you know, like I was saying, just try and strategize about how you're going to move around the painting as you're, you know, as you're making marks. So I'm just coming in here, adding some more darks, using a pretty big brush for this, but it's doing a pretty good job actually.
Is there any medium in the paint that you're using now?
No, there's not. I'm not using a ton of paint. Like I'm getting as much or as little paint on there as I can, but while still being able to kind of move it around. But no, the short answer is no. Now just sort of defining a few shapes here. You know, this is a tricky spot because there's a lot of heavy white right around here. So I probably want to use a smaller version of that. So I'm going to go, you know, this is the brush that I was using. I'm going to use the same type of brush, but it's about like 1/5 the size. So I'm kind of getting into those areas. I've only used about 4 brushes so far. Honestly, that's pretty close to all you're ever going to need. I mean, there's rarely situations where I need to switch between, you know, real subtle brush sizes. It's usually a fairly big drop or increase. So once again, going back to the values here, Just going to find that edge there. Okay. What else do we got? Just carving right through that that white in there. That's always a little tricky. But whenever I feel like, you know, a couple of people have asked about, you know, what do you do when it gets muddy? How do you prevent it from getting muddy? Whenever I feel like it's getting muddy, that to me says that I'm losing a little bit of definition. I'm losing a little bit of the values. That's too red. So, you know, if that ever happens, I like to go back to the darks and the lights and just try and sort of rediscover the values. Because if you lose the value, the ship is going to sink. It's just, you know, it might be pretty, but it's going to fall apart. All right, so I want to add a little darkness to this lemon here while I'm over here. So all I did was, there was a little bit of red. I just took some more of that dark. And so some of that yellow is kind of integrated into it. So I'm getting kind of that, you know, oftentimes you'll see it goes from light to dark, and then it goes light again. And that's kind of what's called a secondary highlight. And that's where the light is coming down, it's bouncing off something light and then kind of going into the shadow and giving you a second hint of light. So knowing kind of the phenomena of how that light works can be helpful. And let's just do a few. I'm going to need another small one. Kind of working that in. Probably get away with doing a little bit in there as well. So just moving around at this point. Alla prima is really fun because, you know, you're just trying to do everything, trying to, you know, keep everything up in the air and keep it you know, active and interesting. What else do I need to do here really quick? So we got about 5-6 minutes left. Let's add a little bit of darkness to that shadow in here. And this is kind of a fun color. This is I'm gonna do this. This is the color that I mixed up yesterday for the sky. I do this all the time. If I've got a palette from a previous painting and I'm working the next day on something else and I go, oh, that works well. I'm gonna try and find out what that bowl color is. And I'm just going to do it by trying to find, you know, overall in here, it's probably sort of a bluish gray. I'm not worrying about all the patterns and stuff in there. I'm just trying to get sort of that middle overall value, overall hue.
What color did you use for the fruit bowl?
So there was some of this blue, some of the white, and then there was some of the yellow. I'd already previously mixed it up yesterday. So it's kind of a light turquoise. And it's not quite what I'm looking at, but I kind of like it. Might have to work with it.
And Leslie, what was the term for a light bouncing off something that you use?
Yeah, that'd be like a secondary highlight. And what that means is it's like a highlight within a shadow area. I'll go back and I'll show you that up close because that's actually a really good term to get.
Allison has to leave soon, so she just wanted to know, are we going to finish the painting that we started last night during any of the future classes?
The George Innes painting, is that the one you're talking about?
I think so. The one that happened. Yeah, the one
Yeah.
that was last night.
I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to have a session where it's like finishing up old paintings, and I'm going to use. And I was actually just thinking about this as you were reading my mind. I'll just take a bunch of stuff that I've done and say, all right, here's what I've got. This is what we're going to do, and try and remedy these problems. So it's the answer is yes, sort of. I mean, I don't think I'll make it like, oh, we're going to revisit that painting that we did back in September, and maybe this is November or something like that. I'm just going to kind of go through some old paintings and just sort of look at them and see what I need to do, and kind of work on them with that attitude. So all I'm doing here is just trying to mimic the pattern that's developed on this bowl. Not sure how much I like that, but I'm just kind of experimenting a little bit. And so what I need to do, and I can see this already, I need to get rid of this white. Let's see, maybe this is the last thing I need to do. So I'm taking this blue here, and I want to get it darker. I'm just sort of taking that route, adding more blue, adding some of this dark. So giving this blue its due. Giving that blue its due. So instead of this kind of generic umber, I'm coming in here with a more appropriate shadow for that shape. And I'm just going to keep the mushrooms the color that they are. One, because I don't have enough time. I just took a little bit because it's a little bit lighter on the bottom of the bowl here. So yeah, this is it's coming together, but this is, let me just get that. Yeah, that's better. It's definitely not done, but it is in keeping with the spirit of a la prima, where you sort of get everything going, up and running, and the basic color scheme is established, and whatever you end up doing next, you can pretty much go anywhere, because you've sort of put the legwork in for all the different pieces of the puzzle. And I could work on this for another 4 or 5 hours, and who knows, maybe I will. But everything is ready. Everything is integrated in terms of, that's red, that's yellow, that's green, that's blue. This is whatever that is. This is that sort of wooden color there. So I've got all the pieces up in the air, and now it's just a matter of kind of going back and revisiting everything while it's still wet, and kind of establishing a little bit more definition to things. And that's why this style of painting can be so fun, because you've just got all this stuff up in the air, and it's really up to you how much you want to pursue it. I'll throw a little highlight in this. Those little highlights are always fun right at the end. There's a little bit of that red. If you notice, there's a little bit of that red in here. So I'm gonna, and you'll see that, especially with glass, it sort of picks up little accents from around the rest of the painting. All right, I think we should maybe have a look and see what other people have done. So yeah, it's got, this is I was a little bit more worried, but I think I got pretty much everything up in the air. And I think, I hope that you get the general spirit of how to approach a painting like this, where you're trying to get everything done in the first. Alla prima. All right, let's see what everybody else has been up to. We got some volunteers that would maybe like to pop theirs up on the.
Yeah, hold on one second. Also, someone wanted to know, in order to come back and work on this, like, how do you store it? How, like, should you wait till the paint dries? Should you not wait till the paint dries?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, this would be a painting where I would continue working on it as I've been working on it now. And just, I mean, hopefully what I've shown you is that I worked from the general idea and I'm working down now into the specifics of it. I'm not trying to, you know, finish one thing entirely and then move on to another. I mean, there are painters that work that way. I don't know how they do it. It would drive me crazy. I kind of like to jump around, and, you know, like I showed you a few times, it's like I went from that yellow lemon to the green lime specifically because it's an easy transition to make. So, you know, when you've got a lot of things up in the air, you know, like we do, I just, you know, wherever I am, I'm like, okay, where can I go now? The other option is you can let it sit and wait till it dries, and then, you know, employ maybe some of that more glazing, thinner applications. So it's really up to you as to how you want to carry on from here. It's a very personal decision making. But this is, you know, today the idea was alla prima in the first. You sort of do it all at once. So this would be a situation where I just keep going with this and kind of make the decisions you saw me making, with hopefully some logic to it. All right, do we want to have a look? Maybe spotlight a few if we can do that.
Yeah, we've been doing it, but
Have we?
yeah.
I'm missing.
I'm gonna say I'm a little bit jealous of Jeanette's craft room.
Oh yeah, nice. All right, Matt L. I had it on gallery view, so it was all discombobulated. Very nice. Yeah, excellent job. And Mrs. Maloney, oh, you went straight into one object. Really nice value range there. That looks really good. Excellent. Joanna, oh, nice. That's super complicated. Lots of Anthony. All right. Yeah, you went with my sort of orange background color. I'm going to have to do something about that. I'm not sure what, but all right, Henrietta. Henrietta, you've been a regular. I've seen you a few times. That looks great. Yeah, very nice. Good value range in there. Eileen went full expressive yellow, red background. That looks awesome. Denise, all right, good. Sort of a fabric study with some pears or those are apples, sort of orange apples. Very nice. Good range of color there. Andrea, very nice. A lot of expressionists.
Oh, Jeanette's got her dog
Jeanette,
now.
oh, look, oh, Jeanette, I'm having studio envy.
Right? That's what I was saying.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, very nice painting as well. Oh, it was a puppy. It looked like a lamb. Sarah, all right. Another good one by Sarah. Very nicely done. Good. Yeah, good sort of contrast between sort of muted colors and more intense colors. John Williams again. Oh, you did a little sort of wood still life for the background. Good. Take the time to set it up. That's really important. Very nicely done. Marcia. All right, Marcia, that looks awesome. Good sense of light coming through that wine glass. Yeah, and yours too, Susan. Excellent. Much brighter color palette. Excellent. All right, well, thanks everybody for showing those. That was really cool. Yeah, I would just say this is probably something that I'm going to fiddle with. Maybe I can show it. The next one that we'll do is in 2 days on Friday. So maybe I will show you that. And since somebody mentioned the previous painting, if I got it sitting here somewhere, no, I don't. Sorry about that. But I'll fiddle with this a little bit and maybe show it next time so people can kind of see how the progress goes with this painting. So let me get myself back here. All right. So thank you all so much.
And just to be clear, Mike, the painting that you went off of, it was just a picture that you took with your phone, right?
Yes. Yeah.
wasn't-
I mean, it's
okay.
just a little, I had a little table off to the side, set it up in the natural light, streaming into the window, took a big picture and then cropped it down into the composition that we used. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. Very easy to do, but it takes time, and spend time on it and it'll really pay off. It helps. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Went a little bit over time, but not too bad. And I hope to see you all on Friday. See you later.
Bye.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.